I'm now joined by Pravin Gordhan, the Minister of Public Enterprises, the man tasked with fixing our state-owned entities. And please join the network with your comments using the hashtag the Modise Network. Minister Gordhan, pleasure to catch up with you and to have you on our program. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Now, every time we see you in the media, you appear on television, it's Eskom this, Eskom that. Somebody was joking the other day saying that we should call you the Minister of Eskom, much as you are Minister of State-Owned Enterprises. Focus is on Eskom for obvious reasons. But why does it seem like a difficult task to turn it around?
Well, the importance of Eskom lies in the fact that, in a modern economy, electricity is key to households and to businesses, to the mining industry and the manufacturing industry. And it's now an established fact that a shortage of electricity actually harms growth prospects. And you could have as much as 1% of GDP shaved off if you don't attend to the electricity issue. The second is that Eskom was amongst the key institutions that were the subject of state capture, meaning corruption, putting in the wrong boards, wrong management, wrong ministers, and the abuse of funds, largely through the procurement system. And thirdly, once you start interfering with the money side, invariably what we have found across the state-owned entities is you begin to neglect the operational side. And that means that power station managers or staff are not given the support, they're not given the kind of skills that are required, and we are now going through the process through the Eskom management team of restoring the authority of power station managers, restoring the kind of skill set that is required at each power station. And I must take this opportunity to actually compliment the current management at power stations and in Eskom for the extraordinary effort that they're putting in to keep the lights on.
But now the view is that once you changed the board and appointed the new board, it's no longer new now, that things were going to work out fine within a short period of time. But because of the recent experiences of load shedding, the perception that is growing out there in the public domain is that this is a board that's not suited for the task. There have been comments also about the capacity of the CEO and his executive team, that they seem incapable of fixing the problem. But it sounds like you still have confidence in them.
Well, they're there. The board was appointed in January 2018 and the CEO as well. But I think what we need to understand is that we're going through a period of transition. You have had a period of corruption and lack of attention, as I said, to operations, to a period, as the President said, where we've got to find a new business model for Eskom. We've got to look at the question of separating generation, transmission and distribution. We've got to get the financial side right, which is 419 billion rands of debt as we stand today, and the CEO is a very competent guy on the financial side. Secondly, as I was explaining, get the operational side of the business right so that the power is generated to the extent where we don't have the shortfalls that we've had in the past. The third is to make some structural changes, which is the separation into the three entities, but also look at debt issues, coal supply issues, etc., and look at the financial side in relation to the structural side. The fourth is the people side. Many good people have left Eskom or were marginalized in the process. And this is a pattern term across state-owned entities. So you've got to start rebuilding teams, whether it's at a board level or at a management level. And that's what we're doing during this transition process. And the last, which is very important for workers at Eskom, for communities in the mining areas and so on, is to ensure a just transition, meaning that as you close down a coal power station or close down a mine or reduce the use of coal over a period of time, which is what the world is demanding, that we manage that in a way in which it is socially responsible. There's a future for workers, there's a future for communities, and that's another 5 or 10 year process. But the platform for that needs to be laid now. On the board side, we are looking at putting in more engineers on the board so that you have a better identification of issues at a technical level, and the technical review team that the board and I set up has been doing excellent work. So now at a micro level, we have a lot more detail about where the problems and challenges lie, but also the opportunities to improve operations, to improve efficiency, so that we can move away from the sort of edge of the table that we find ourselves in at the moment.
Well, the recent load shedding came as a surprise to many South Africans because, you know, the sense the nation had was that Eskom was on the mend and the days of load shedding were over. But it appears the government, represented by yourself and the entire government, were taken by surprise, and the public as well. How did we get to the load shedding that took everybody by surprise? In other words, why is it that it was not anticipated?
Well, that was a semi-perfect storm where a number of factors came together. And the one thing, Tim, that we've been trying to do over the recent past is be absolutely frank with the public. So there's no hidden agendas. There's no information that we have that the public doesn't have, except at a highly technical level. And what happened on that particular occasion is that you had each power station has between 6 and 10 or so units. Each unit has a boiler. Each boiler has about 600 kilometers of tubings that are used to heat and provide the steam and then generate power. On that particular occasion, 9 of those units had one or other kind of fault, particularly these tube leaks. And at the same time, we get anything between 1,200 and, say, 1,600 megawatts from Kaharabasa, the hydro plant in Mozambique. And as you know, we had the cyclone that it damaged the 2 lines, and it took us in Eskom about 48 to 72 hours to restore 1 line, which brought in about 800 megawatts, and the second line, I think, is still in the process of being repaired. So that perfect storm resulted in the level 4 load shedding. Now, why do we have load shedding? The reason we have load shedding is that the team that manages the grid, which is the distribution or transmission of the electricity, has to ensure that there's enough electricity available, enough power available to enter that grid. If they feel that the generating side is incapable of generating 35,000 megawatts, for example, then they've got to manage the load shedding in a way in which it doesn't fall below a certain point to sustain the transmission grid itself. And I've visited those colleagues a number of times. You have world-class systems operators at that level. And so it's a semi-perfect storm. These are the circumstances that actually led to it. What we need to find now are the more sustainable solutions as we go forward. And part of that sustainable solution lies in getting Medupi and Kusile to perform better than they're performing at the moment. Again, we have now a number of technical reports. We're in the process of bringing all of that together. And part of the 9-point generation plan that Eskom management developed is to give specific attention to those plants. Firstly, they're still in the process of being built. Secondly, as you know, we've had time overruns and cost overruns. But thirdly, those units that are commercialized or connected to the grid, in fact, are not operating optimally at the moment. So part of the target now is to get them operating optimally so that we get the numbers that we require. So although we have somewhere between 44 and 48,000 megawatts of total installed capacity, at any one point in time, we might actually only have 30, 31, 32,000 megawatts available. And just to explain to the public the way this works in a power station context is that we have what they call planned outages. So that's planned maintenance, and that takes out between 5 and 6,000, 6,500 megawatts at any particular point in time. And then you have unplanned outages. That is where these tubes burst or a fan gives up or a steam, a water pump is not functioning properly. And that can range between 8,000 and 11,000 megawatts at a particular point in time. So what we require is the reserve capacity, which will enable us to manage power supply in this kind of context.
Let's talk about the finances at Eskom, right? The Minister of Finance, Tito Mboweni, said government is going to make 69 billion rands available over a 3-year period. And a few weeks later, you said there's an additional 200 billion rands that's needed, more than 200 billion, to turn Eskom around. In the meantime, we're sitting with a debt of what, 419 or so. So, and this will be additional debt on top of the 419 that you're talking about. Is that correct?
No, it's the board that did the calculation, which says that we expected a tariff of X amount, but we got Y, so there's a deficit there. We expected cost savings of A, but we're getting cost savings of B, because we are not looking at the staff factor at this particular point in time, so there's another deficit there. So when you add all of those deficits, you get that number of around 200 billion. But that is more the comparison between what you expect and what you get at the end of the day. The debt burden is a separate piece, which is historically largely through the investment in Medupi and Kusile and other factors, where the capital investment came from the tariffs that we pay at a day-to-day level. You have a sum of 419 today. By the end of the year, something like 470 billion rands. So what the Minister of Finance on behalf of government did, as you correctly point out, is 69 billion over the 3-year period, but you've got to take it over a 10-year period, because that's the commitment government is making. And the Treasury and ourselves and others are now looking at how do you manage the rest. So as soon as the technical work on that is completed, the Minister of Finance will once again pronounce on this in terms of how we go forward.
There are several issues, we've mentioned them, there are at least 5 separate things that need to happen to fix Eskom, but there's the politics now behind it, because the detractors of what you are telling us now are saying that there's a lot of stuff that's going on with Eskom that we're not paying attention to, or we're not being made aware of. They talk about the agreements with the independent power producers, for instance, and they also say that, you know, the agenda here with the separation of the Eskom business is in order to privatize it to specific, already identified interests. What is your response to all of these claims and criticisms leveled at you and Eskom?
It's nonsense, to put it bluntly. And I think the public needs to be aware that not so long ago, some people wanted to sign on to a 1 trillion rand deal to have nuclear power installed over a 10-15-year period. And so you have a very active nuclear lobby, which then disguises itself in the various forms that you've actually described. So that's the first point. The second, the President and everybody has said this is not about privatization, and this is not about job losses. And the proof of the pudding ultimately will be in the eating. So as we transform Eskom into its new form, which will take a few years, and the start needs to be made now, let's see what we're actually talking about. The third is that we've made international commitments on climate change. Now, you can't have commitments to climate change and no renewables. So depending on the Department of Energy and the manner in which they craft the integrated resource plan, that plan will actually tell us how much of nuclear, how much of renewables, how much of coal, how much of gas. We have potential to get gas included. How much of LPG can we include as well? So in other words, what's the energy mix for South Africa as we go into the next 5 or 10 years as we go forward? And that will then direct us in a particular way as a country in terms of what installations we require and what costs. Yeah. The second is you should get an expert to come along on renewable energy. The cost of renewable energy is dropping remarkably. Yeah. So it did cost a bit more at the beginning. And once you average it out over time, and this is not my area, it's the area that Minister Hadebe should be dealing with.
Let's pause right here, Minister, and we'll pick up the conversation as we look at other state-owned entities as well as the politics that go with your portfolio and, of course, your person. You've come under attack in recent times. I'd like us to probe that.
Sure.
When we return, we continue our conversation with Minister Gordhan after the break. Don't go away.